Well, good evening. Great to see you. Welcome, welcome. Glad that you have chosen to be here tonight as we'll spend a little time in the Word. Gee, I wonder, with it being the very first day of October, what your interim pastor will want to talk about tonight. Got any clue at all as to where we might go? You know, just how about we just go all the way back to the beginning and take a look at what the Proverbs reveal to us just in regards to this introduction. I hope it has been a good week for you. It's been an extremely busy week at the college. My wife has been very involved. We've been going through the 10-year accreditation for the college, and all of that goes through her office. Every statistical report that there is to be done for the school goes through her office and is her responsibility. And so literally for the past 2 years, getting ready for this review of the school, and it's all taken place this week. And the president of the college sent a memo out to everyone today that our school passed with flying colors, absolutely no exceptions to any of the policies. And so I am very, very thankful that is the case, and that we have good people in good places that are doing good things for our college. And I truly believe, not just because I work there, I truly believe that we're blessed to have the college that we have here in Pearl River County. It's a good place, and I'm very blessed to be a part of it and to be there. We are looking at Proverbs chapter 1. I'm going to take a little different approach with you tonight. Let's kind of see how this goes, because we have looked at Proverbs 1 before. Since you know this, or maybe you remember this. It is it's the introduction, or you could even say it even starts with a prologue here. If you start reading with me, beginning with verse 1, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. So it already addresses, who these proverbs are coming from. Either he wrote them or he collected them, or it's a combination of the two. For attaining wisdom and discipline, for understanding words of insight, for acquiring a disciplined and prudent life, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to the simple. I can relate to that. Knowledge and discretion to the young. I can relate to that. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get what? Get guidance. That's right. For understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. And then look at verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. So these first 7 verses are a prologue, really an introduction to the whole book. And numerous times in our time of looking at the Proverbs together, we have seen, these examples or illustrations of this is what the wise person chooses versus the person of folly, or the foolish, person, or the foolish actions that we can choose in our lives. The chapter also presents 2 very distinctive paths, one being wisdom leading and guiding our life versus folly. I looked for some synonyms of folly. Madness was one of the ones that came up. Foolery also was mentioned. So you have 2 paths, with wisdom leading to a better life, and folly leading to death. And one of the things that I just kind of recognized, with that, there's no gray here. And we very much like to live in the gray, don't we? We have rules, but do all of the rules really apply to us directly? Or, can we hedge the rules a little bit whenever, it benefits us, the most? Am I making sense to you? And so, it's black and white. It's very much like, when James wrote his letter to the first century church, which we've also talked about several times. I consider James's letter to be the Proverbs of the New Testament. I've told you that as well. 108 verses altogether. And half of them are directly talking about, he's very direct, he's very specific. He says, you say that you're a follower of Christ, not just a believer, because he starts off in the beginning and say, even the demons believe, right? Very black and white. And so he's like, okay, you say you're a follower of Christ, here are things that you should be doing. You say that you're a follower of Christ, here are things that you should not be doing. No gray, in between. But you want to represent and demonstrate that you're working to the best of your ability to follow God's knowledge or God's wisdom, thus giving us the knowledge that we need, then here are the things to do. Here are the things to avoid. Or you're going to wind up, as I just said for a moment ago with this introduction, we're going to wind up on the wrong path that leads us away from the knowledge and the wisdom that God desires for us to follow. So look once again there at verse 7 where it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. In other words, if we truly are seeking out God's direction, and if we really want to truly understand God, it all has to begin with honoring God. It says fear, but another way of looking at it, as we've talked about before, is choosing to honor, choosing to respect God. And if we're looking for that knowledge, then we have to be willing to fear and honor. And I would even add to that, and I'm adding to it tonight, humble ourselves before our God. So here's a question for you. It's a question that I ask 18 to 22-year-olds on a regular basis. But I haven't asked you this question lately. And it's not one for you to answer out loud, raising your hand. I'm not teaching class right now, okay? So I want you to just kind of think, about, what is your answer? And I would ask that you not just think about it in the few minutes that we're having this devotion, but as you drive home tonight, you think about these questions. They're not hard questions. Even as you put your head on the pillow tonight, that you reflect upon these few minutes that we have together and these two questions. The first one is, once again, very simple. What is God teaching you right now? What is God teaching you right now? And then the follow-up question, are you listening? Are you choosing to listen? Because we have all butted heads with those younger folk. Hello? Good evening. And tried to show them the right way to go. And what's the right way? Well, we've determined that the right way is our way. But do they listen? Oh, we got a quick answer over here on this side. Yeah. I think I laughed and jokingly told y'all that, AI is a weird thing, but I have enjoyed using it for the purposes of taking photos of students and then making cartoons and that kind of stuff out of those photos and, posting them on social media, or taking a photo of somebody and making them dance around, just to do it, just to mess, with the students. I saw this, on, I think social media, I think might have been Facebook, where they have ads and that kind of thing. There was an ad for a T-shirt, that I saw, and I was like, that's a really cool T-shirt right there. I'm going to change it a little bit with AI. And so I had the T-shirt put onto one of our leaders through AI. And so it's my student wearing this shirt that I changed the words just a little bit, and it says this: if at first you do not succeed, go back and do what Dr. Stan told you to do the first time. I personally think that would sell. Been trying to be in negotiations with the bookstore to see what we could work out with that. But here once again, what is God teaching you? Are you choosing to listen? Very simple questions, but pretty deep in regards to whether or not we are willing to humble ourselves, understand that the beginning of knowledge comes from this respect of the God who loves us. So I would say, in addition to that, spiritual growth comes from that as well. So here's another question. How are you growing spiritually? Please, please, please do not come to a point in your life where you have the mindset that you have retired from growing spiritually. We all should continue to grow in our faith. We all should continue to read God's Word. And you know those times when you've read something over and over and over and over again, and yet one more time you read it, and you're shaking your head like, I think you already know where I'm going, with this. It's like, wow, I have read that 100-ish times, and it's just now that I realize what that is saying to me, today. I will have students oftentimes, from class that will say things to me like, this class, and this is not a, focus on me moment at all. It's a focus on the student. Because at the end of the semester, just like when I'm preparing a sermon, and the last question that I ask myself is, okay, so what? What is this message going to mean? Because I don't know about for you, but I know that I have sat through my fair share of messages over the years, where someone spoke for a very long time and walked out, and you were like, well, what was that? And I'm not putting anybody down. I'm just sharing with you my experience, before. And I try to the best of my ability not to do that. And so I ask that so what, question, so what with, whatever the message is it going to relate to the people? Is this a message that will truly lead people to spiritual growth and in continuing in spiritual maturity in our lives? Well, we have to desire spiritual maturity. The opposite of that is going to be becoming like some folks that we would talk about that get set in their ways. And we talk about folks like that, well, they just set in their ways. They're not going to change. They're not going to listen. They're not going to, are you with me? You understanding? That's, we need to avoid that. That's the path we do not need to be on, regardless of where we are in life. So we go back around to the very first question. What is God teaching you now? And are you listening to what God is teaching you? Basically, the encouragement is to strive to have a life, to live a life of lifelong discipleship. What does it mean to be discipled? Or what is a disciple? A disciple is a learner. Those guys that Jesus picked, to walk with him during his 3 years of public ministry, God was skin on. Those guys that he picked, we call them what? We call them disciples. They were learners. They were walking with Jesus. But Jesus knew that when he ascended back into heaven, it's what we've been looking at in the book of Acts, he knew that these guys, with the exception of one, were going to be the people that were going to become the leaders of the church, the body of Christ, back then in the first century and here and now as well. And so it's important that we have this mindset of being a continual learner, seeking out more and more wisdom in our lives and from that. So once again, we can focus on, my wisdom comes from my own personal experiences. Things I learned the hard way, and then try to impart, that to someone else. And there are lessons. I could pass that microphone around, and we could all, share, some lessons that we learned the hard way. I'm encouraging us to be intentional about sharing with others, especially younger people, to share with them what God is continuing to teach us here and now in our lives and how that is making a difference in our lives. Going back to those students in class, at the end of the semester, they'll have to write an essay for me. It's not hard. They can't even get it wrong as long as they put it in the right format because I'm looking for their opinion. You can't get your opinion wrong. Just put it in the right format. Write it the way I ask you to write it, and there's the grade. But the question simply is this. Okay, you've had this intro class to Old Testament, New Testament. It's a survey class. I'm covering 39 books of the Old Testament in one semester. My goodness. I'm covering 27, in the New Testament, plus the interbiblical period, the 400 years where God was silent, with his people. It's an intro class. So we're very much on the surface, but I'm trying to teach them contextual history, so that when they read the Word for themselves, they understand what's going on because they understand the historical background of what's taking place. So many times I will have students with those essays over the 20-ish years that I've been teaching that class now. I have students that will say something like this: I have been in church all my life, and I have learned more about Old Testament, New Testament, whichever. I have learned more about that section of the Bible in this one semester than I have learned in my entire life being in church. And I don't understand why that's the case. We have to be intentional about demonstrating how important it is to continue to be a learner, to continue to be a disciple, to continue to seek that wisdom in our lives, and to demonstrate that to the people that are around us. As we look once again, at this introduction, it also provides for us an understanding of wisdom, and maybe how we look at wisdom now versus how we looked at wisdom when we were younger. I'm dealing with a group of folks that I joke with them. When we have a holiday, I always have the same little spiel, same little speech that I share with them. And it's very simple. I say this to them: hey, I want you to enjoy this break. Don't do anything stupid. Just don't do anything stupid. And they all kind of laugh at me and kind of look at me, and the first time I say it, the second and third time that I say it, they're kind of like, yeah, he's saying the same thing, he's always said, don't do anything stupid. And then I kind of began to qualify that. I was like, if you happen to be around a group of people and somebody says, hey, watch me do this, you don't need to be around those folks. You need to get away from that, especially if they say, hey, watch me do this and hold my beer. That's what you don't need to be there. Okay? Walk away from that situation. Don't do anything stupid. But this whole part of their brain is still developing. Frontal lobe here, frontal cortex. All this is, that's not fully developed. They're 25, 26 years old. And so that's why you'll ask, a teenager all the way up into college age, it's like they'll do something like, what were you thinking? I'm sorry, buddy, you're the only one in here tonight. You're learning a whole lot about yourself right now, okay? I'm diagnosing you in front of the whole church. But it's like, why did you just do that? What were you thinking? And what's your go-to answer? Oh, there it is. We already heard it from Mom. Oh no, it's not 3 words. It's just 1 word. Oh no. I'm saying to you, bless their hearts. Sometimes they don't know. They will look at you and they're like, I don't know why I did that. They come into my office and they say, I never would have dreamed that I would have found myself in the place that I am in right now. I can't believe that I did that. Be an example, being that person who is intentional about continuing to be a learner, in my opinion, is one of the best ways to demonstrate and to teach a younger generation about just how important it is. Not just telling them that it's important, showing them that is important. Because what have we also said in my time here with you? We always tell people more by what we do than by what we say. That is always the case. And I say in regards to seeking out godly wisdom in our lives, what is God teaching you? Are you listening? We tell people more by what we do than by what we say. Well, if it's true with our interpersonal relationships, it's absolutely true with our one true God. And if He's provided His wisdom for us, and if we're just going through the routine of just reading over it because we got this interim preacher, that says that that's a real good idea, but we're not taking time to really reflect upon what it is saying. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teachings. They will be a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, not if, I would say when. When they entice you, do not give in to them. This is Dr. Stan's don't do anything, what? Don't do anything stupid. Now, the first couple of times they laugh at me, when I say that. About the third time, we're getting towards the end of the semester, it'll be that Thanksgiving break, and I'll say that once again, and they're kind of like, yeah, we've heard you say that, kind of thing. But I always at that point add something onto it. I say something like this, because this is what happened in my life. When I was in their place in life, I can remember walking across the campus at East Central, which is where I went to school initially, and seeing a friend that I'd known for a long time. We were from different towns, but we were always competing with one another in these band competition things that we went to. He played trumpet, I played trumpet as well, and so I'd known him for several years, but now we were at the same school and we were playing in the same band together, and and all of those things, and had become closer friends, as a result of just those few months in that freshman year of being together. I saw him on the campus. He was over across the way, and I kind of waved at him. I was like, hey, have a good break. Why don't we get together, when we get back? You come to Morton, or I'll go to Carthage, which is where he was from. He's like, yeah, that'd be cool. Let's do that. When was the last time I saw him? And I say to the students, his physical body has been in the ground longer than he got to live. Actually, twice as long now than he got to live. That gets their attention for a little while. So being intentional about continuing to learn and imparting that. There is a question that I think would also be interesting. As you reflect back, what would you tell your younger self in regards to God's wisdom, godly wisdom? What would you tell your younger self? If at first you do not succeed, no, I'm sorry, no, that wouldn't work. We have struggles that we go throughout our lives, and we're going to continue to do that. We live in a world that is not fair. We've not been promised fairness. Fairness does not exist, in my opinion. And with those struggles, there's going to be times that we are going to make mistakes because we are not perfect. We're far from it because of the sin nature that we have. And as a result of that sin nature, we're going to make mistakes. And as a result, there will be hindsight in our lives as well, where we can look back and say, if I had gone this way, how much different, things would be. I'm saying to you, we're all going to experience that. And maybe there will be a little bit of benefit to those that we love that are younger than us to share those things. But the greatest benefit is for them to see us continuing to grow and mature in our understanding and our gaining more and more wisdom from God's Word. And this prologue It even has, warnings against rejecting wisdom. Wisdom is personified here, as it is several times throughout the books, the 31 chapters. Look at verse 20. Wisdom calls aloud in the street. She raises her voice in the public squares. Well, if that's taking place, who's the wisdom for? Just the church people? Just the religious people? No. What is it saying? That this wisdom is for, where is she? Wisdom is being called out in the public streets. Wisdom is for everyone that will be willing to listen. Wisdom calls aloud in the street. She raises her voice in the public squares. At the head of a noisy street, she cries out. In the gateways of the city, she makes her speech. How long will you simple ones love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery and fools hate knowledge? If you had responded to my rebuke, I would have poured out my heart to you and made my thoughts known to you. If we're just only willing to listen. Wisdom should be passed down from generation to generation. So that, I will end with this. Do you want your family, do you want those that are part of your family to make the same mistakes that you made in your life? Of course not. Of course not. I was talking to somebody several months ago, and the conversation wound up going way too long. But the person was telling me I used to live in the town, the city, where this person is still living, and this person was telling me about some things that were going on in the church where I had served, and I was just amazed that some of the sinful things that people were doing. The only thing is that decades ago when I served in that same church, there were people that were doing the same exact thing. The only difference is the characters had changed. The people had changed. The craziness, the foolishness, what was the word? Foolery, madness, that's the word I'm looking for. The madness, was continuing. It's just, different people were doing it. And wisdom calls out in the street to everyone, calls out loud and says, if you'll listen, it doesn't have to be that way. So I'll end with this. What is God teaching you? Proverbs 1:5 says, the wise listen and they add to their learning. What's God teaching you? And are we listening? So, Father, I thank you again for the power of your word. I thank you for an October the 1st to be able to look at the beginning once again of these chapters of godly wisdom that we find in the Old Testament. And I pray, Father, that as many of us start all over again and reading them, that we're not just reading them just to be doing it, but that we're really taking time to reflect and to even ask you, what is it you want me to learn? What is it that you want me to improve? How do you want me to grow in my relationship with you and gain even more wisdom in my life, regardless of where I am in life, regardless of my age, so that I can benefit from that wisdom and so that the people that I love can see that I am demonstrating that, not just because I'm trying to make a show for them, but because they can see that you are making that difference in my life and that you want to make that same difference in their lives as well. Father, you've given us so much. I am thankful. We are thankful. It's just sometimes we forget to demonstrate how thankful we are. Most of all, we're thankful for the one who got it perfect, your Son, the one that we try to emulate to the very best of our ability. because it is in Jesus' name that we do pray. Will you say it with me? Amen.